Hello to all the señores and señoritas, buenos dias. Today we're going to talk about Europe, and specifically about how Europe is currently suffering from the heat. Also, it's suffering due to the leadership of certain so-called powerful leaders, which we'll discuss today. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and let's begin. Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary are struggling the most, as I've mentioned. On the Danube, even shipping is being shut down there, not to mention the nuclear power plants, which suddenly need water for cooling. There's no water, the nuclear power plants aren't working, there's no electricity. It's a vicious cycle. They're telling us that the extreme heat is breaking temperature records and creating serious problems for the region. With rivers drying up, navigation is disrupted, and water and hydroelectric supplies are at risk. And once again, Austria and Slovakia are suffering the most. They recorded the hottest day in their entire history of observations. Imagine countries where it was never particularly hot suddenly facing extreme heat. It's like when snow falls in some African countries where even the elders have never seen it and people don't know how to react to it. And here, it's the opposite. It's getting hotter and hotter. Basically, the continents are switching places. Let's just say, apparently the wrong continent is now called Africa. According to the National Meteorological Service, in one of the towns, the temperature rose to 41 degrees. In southern Slovakia as well, it reached 41, but with a difference of 0.2 degrees, the difference is small. Well, in general, it probably feels like hell. Actually, why probably? Here in Spain, it's not much fun either. We also get temperatures of 40 and even 50, depending on the city. But we're used to it. I've even gotten a tan over this time, and that's with the lighting. It's not that noticeable, but actually I'm really brown. Muir, but as they say, I look whiter than Spain. Anyway, alright. Extreme heat and drought in the country are having a stronger impact on people and nature. Some settlements are struggling with water shortages. Shipping has stopped in some places partially, in others completely, and the disruptions continue. When will everything return to normal? It's still unknown for now. Most likely this situation will continue until autumn, and we would really like it to rain. Because if there is no precipitation, it will be the taxpayers who take the hit. The taxpayers who are already compensating for the increased cost of fuel. And logistics accordingly for food products, consumer goods, and everything else. And on top of that, the weather is imposing its own rules. Of course, there's nothing good about this. But, well, if at least there were, some leaders there, sometimes everything just goes wrong. A crisis manager comes in and he doesn't create a crisis. On the contrary, he tries to get out of it. And so, a crisis manager comes in, fixes everything, and puts things in order. But in our case, that's not the way. There's a saying, through hardships to the stars. And in Europe, in some countries, it's actually the opposite, from the stars to hardships. And as a result, it became a flourishing garden in some countries, though not all. We're still facing hardships. That's not the case in Spain. In Spain, we're sitting among palm trees, everything's fine. But in some countries, they're sitting in thorn bushes, and they're singing romances, because there's no money. Money is tight, and people are singing the blues. Basically, that's the kind of singing going on. Everyone is dragging out their own litany however they can. According to published data, public opinion accordingly is changing because of how effective some leaders have been. 70% of German citizens already have a negative attitude toward Partagenosa Merz. In France, only 23% approve of Emmanuel Macron. That means 68% have a negative attitude. The numbers show that the current European leaders have lost their political capital, but here too, it's as if they ever really had it in the first place. Honestly, I don't really remember, except maybe for this Macron. But for anyone to have a positive opinion of Merz, he only became chancellor on his second try, and suddenly out of nowhere, political capital. What, where, when, why? A lot of questions? In 2027, this whole coalition of these imperfect ones. Let's put it this way. Okay, those who wanted to, it's coming to an end. This coalition is falling apart because Macron is doing badly. Starmer has already dropped out. This very Partagenosa is also most likely leaving. And most likely in the fall. It's likely politicians with a very different approach will take power. Not only regarding the Ukraine issue, but in general. Also regarding their economy, various migration policies, and everything else. In France, the main candidate to replace Macron is considered to be Marine Le Pen, the leader of the National Rally. She openly speaks out against continuing military support for Kyiv. But something else could happen. Right now, she says one thing, but later she might say something different. And this, and will boost the economy, and that's it. But when they come to power, it's like with many of them. Zelensky also made promises. And we'll do that, and we'll bring in gas, and children will get money at birth. We'll get the country back on its feet right now. Well, they did lift it off its knees, but there were no legs, and in the end, we have nothing. That is, the rhetoric has completely changed. The political programs, directions, and points have completely changed, so to speak. The same thing can happen to anyone. It's like a curse now. And not just in Europe, and many people have just started to speak out. In the past, a politician at least tried to do what he promised, at least partially. Now they say a bunch of things, and then it turns out otherwise. Oh, but it didn't work out for us, we weren't lucky, and things like that. But let's get back to our Le Pens. In Italy, besides that, there will be parliamentary elections in 2027. Ukraine has also become a stumbling block. For example, former Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte stated that the party will vote against further military aid to Ukraine. He insists on the need to start peace negotiations. And Giorgia Meloni is also in general experiencing problems because her partners are not very willing to support Kyiv and absolutely do not want to increase the defense budget. Now reports say that Kyiv has less and less time left. Poland is also extremely dissatisfied. They say that the will of European Union citizens in the upcoming electoral processes will be a serious test for the future of Ukraine. According to these reports, the Ukrainian armed forces are experiencing a severe shortage of interceptor missiles which was not anticipated. Zelensky has mentioned this at every opportunity. And this fall, local elections in the German states will be the first serious test for Merz. Some media outlets have suggested the possibility of his resignation in the event of a major defeat. If Merz falls behind and Macron leaves, then it's really all over. No programs will help anymore, neither resilience nor determination. Nothing good, plus the heat is still affecting people's minds, and on top of that there's Trump. He stated that the United States does not intend to provide Ukraine with long-range missiles. On one hand, people were shouting that Zelensky had become Trump's favorite, that he was close to him and willing and able to do anything. But then Trump acted, as always, in his own way. So, what happened next? As for other information, other sources say, for example, that the refusal to supply Patriot missiles is due to a severe shortage of these missiles for the United States itself. Well, Zelensky made a strange assumption that the West is deliberately reducing the supply of Patriot missiles in order to force Kyiv to be more flexible in negotiations. But actually, the duration of the war between Russia and Ukraine is already longer than the duration of the Great Patriotic War. And both sides are being ruined, as well as Europe, which is sending money there like crazy, and everything is just being ground up there, while only the US seems to be profiting a little. But again, it's not clear whether it's the country's budget or, let's say, people who are closely connected to that budget. You know, there's a world of difference here, like in that joke, and the fingers, yes, here they are. Well, it's about the same with the money. Now, we've talked a bit about Germany, and now it's a pretty direct indication, that's what it's called. It turns out that the Germans want change. We want change, like it was sung in Tsoy's song, and now the Germans apparently are learning folklore from the Soviets and are also dissatisfied. Against this backdrop of discontent, the alternative for Germany, as we are told, continues to strengthen its position. As a result, 1 in 3 Germans fears becoming a victim of a terrorist attack, according to a monthly survey. And the media outlet with a name that's hard for me to pronounce, and I don't speak German at all, forgive me. But here too, there are terrorist attacks in airports where it turns out drones are flying. Plus 7 out of 9 Germans consider the danger of Islamist-motivated terrorist attacks to be very or quite high. Oh, that's how it is, and suddenly people started to be afraid. Before, they used to stand there with signs, but in general we won't touch on this issue, it's complicated. 6 in 10 see right-wing extremist attacks as a major threat, and nearly as many fear left-wing extremist attacks. Overall, it's a problem. They want to continue border control. 100 that in the deputies, some laws have been adopted in Africa, which is almost overrun by temporary migrants. And now Europe is alarmed, and almost 60% of German citizens consider local European solutions to the migration problem more reasonable than actions at the national level. You know, again, Siberian law prohibits such decisions, and I think in general the term reasonableness, well, like the subtitles made by Dematozok applies, it exists. There are still some, but that's more of an exception to the rules, which actually proves the rule itself. Right now, everyone is just pulling in their own direction, and sometimes it turns out in such a twisted way with such a flip that it's just scary to watch. 71% of Germans surveyed believe that the border control in Germany, which has been in place since 2024 to curb illegal migration, should be extended. But honestly, I don't know how strong that control really is. In my opinion, it's not much. You know, it's like trying to hold vermicelli in a colander. And almost half of the population considers the European plans to create deportation centers outside the EU to be the right decision, including as many as 77.3% of supporters of the Alternative for Germany party. And its popularity is growing very rapidly. And the others, especially the Christian Democratic Union and the Christian Social Union, are slightly declining and keep declining. The combined rating of these two parties has dropped to a record low of 21 percentage points. That is 21 percentage points. So what does that mean? But obviously 79% will not support them. Well, let's put it this way. About 70% do not support the work of this union, and 9% may be abstained. Some were digging potatoes, some were drinking beer with dumplings, but overall that's how it turned out. So it's hard to say that Germans are really satisfied with what they have now. Rather, no, they're actually very dissatisfied. Germans are unhappy with the governments. They want change. They say it again and again. The overwhelming majority of Germans are dissatisfied. 85% of Germans are dissatisfied with the federal government. Almost everyone, even with the new administration. I once watched an interview with Noktia with English translation German, as he said, I don't know. And in that English translation, he said that supposedly, even if you don't like what we're doing, we will keep doing it. But those aren't the words of a boy, they're the words of a man raised on democratic principles. Now, most of these powerful leaders are raised on democratic foundations, and what comes out is something like a strange kind of democracy. I wouldn't call it that, it's called something else. What's next? It turns out gas prices are stable. So at least somewhere, if you wanted some good news, well, there you go. The wholesale price of gas in the UK and the Netherlands isn't showing significant changes on Friday amid caution. So you can freely have a beer, eat some more of those soft French rolls, and have some tea. The gas futures contract for delivery next month is stable at the current level. Overall, it's holding steady. On top of that, one of the key committees of the Iranian parliament is considering bills to ban the passage through the Hormuz Strait of American, Israeli, and British ships that will be recognized as hostile. And if that suddenly happens, then gas prices will skyrocket so much that it will be crazy. In one of my videos, I already mentioned how I was refueling. And what used to cost 60 euros, sometimes 50, and in ancient times even 70, now I refueled for 100 euros. But over a short period of time, prices for all this have gone up by about 3 times. Write in the comments how long a tank of gas lasts in your car. I mean, how much? Does your wallet have enough money for it? On top of that, they say the price forecast will go up for the winter period because of low natural gas reserves in Europe. On one hand, we'll cut off cheap energy resources from Russia, and on the other hand, we won't get anything else. And on top of that, we'll sign a contract with the US, which sells LNG and some other oil and gas products at higher prices. Well, that's because you have nowhere else to go. There's just no other financial source. That's the reason. Well, I mean, who else can you buy from? Azerbaijan, or maybe fly or drive somewhere far away and bring gas back in canisters? I don't know, really. If in the UK, not giving water, onions, gas, well, maybe. If it was there, there probably would have already been some. Ah, strange. And all of this will go on for quite a long time. Because what these talented characters have done again with their sensitive approach. Conversation Milliard Santa Life, the system of Europe. Well, it will still take a long time. People in Europe and even those outside will all have to face the consequences together, unfortunately. Because nothing good will come from the global energy system again if it is destroyed or worsens in one place. Prices will rise everywhere. And judging by all these new factors, refineries, borders, agra, gas stations being smashed, tankers being blown up, in short, no one will get off easy. And as they said in Treasure Island, even the living will envy the dead. Let's hope this doesn't happen soon, but there are always possibilities. And on the bright side, three wonderful countries, Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, have formed a defense alliance. There are some girls standing there, I don't know why, but apparently they're guarding, maybe those very scholars. Well, these are the leaders here. Erdogan, the prince, and the head of Pakistan. They're all signing the defense pact, and apparently the Women's Guard is watching over this. In short, the agreement is aimed at weapons production, and these three parties have promised to defend each other in case any of them is attacked. And what's most interesting is that the UAE is also involved. They signed it, or rather they're expecting an attack from Iran. That's it. So Turkey will have to defend them, and I don't know how they're going to handle that because I don't think Turkey really wants to fight somewhere beyond its borders. But that's how it's going to turn out. Moreover, according to military and government sources in Saudi Arabia, one of the reasons for signing the defense agreement right now is exactly this. It's specifically the US-Iran war and its global and regional impact. On the evening of August 6, Saudi Arabia announced that there were casualties as a result of the Houthis attacks on the kingdom, and preparations are underway for further attacks from these very same Houthis. Well, and the latest news is not about Europe, but about the US. If you were hoping to get citizenship by birth, then you should hurry up and have a child in the US as soon as possible. Because Trump has signed a new order restricting birthright citizenship in the country. He already signed it once, but then the judges, with 6 votes out of 9, I think, overturned this order. Well, now there are problems. Because the second order specifically restricts the practice of so-called birth tourism, where pregnant women come to the US to give birth so that their child gets American citizenship. And according to Trump, the provision of the country's constitution that guarantees citizenship to children born on US soil was originally intended for a different purpose. According to Trump, it was meant for the children of slaves born after the Civil War. Well, as we know, everything is fine now. There are no slaves anywhere. That's why Trump wants to cancel all of this. As I already mentioned, he has already tried to limit obtaining US citizenship by birthright. He signed the corresponding order on Inauguration Day, but then it was rejected. And now they differ from the rejected one in that they are more specific and narrow the scope of application. It is also noted that the new attempt by the Trump administration to limit who qualifies will become the subject of a new court case. Well, in short, they'll be hanging around in those courts for quite a while. We don't know what the outcome will be, but we'll see. Well, that's basically it. Oh, and wow, dear Monsignors and Caballeros and everyone else, goodbye to all.